and share the link with you if you would like to share it on Facebook.
Oh, do you want me to put it like while we're going?
I do at the beginning. Yeah,
okay.
I will cut these up later on so that they're a little bit neater. But for the lives, we're pretty comfy. So.
Okay.
And there we are. Look
you
at
sent
that.
It to me?
I'm putting it in the chat right now.
Perfect.
There we go. And let's see here.
Chat where?
In Zoom. I can put it in the Facebook chat though, if that is easier for you.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Considering I have no idea where that is in Zoom.
That's true.
I guess I could figure it out.
I will get it to you right here.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, it's starting with a very lovely screen still shot of my face. It's just so super flattering. Let's see.
Yeah, that gives me time to
cool.
Post it.
Yes, yeah, you are totally good. And so if you guys are here, if people are here already, say hi, guys. Let me know that you're here as we're getting ready. That way I can do our introductions and all that good stuff. Let me close this down real quick. There we go. All right. Bobby is here. Hello, Bobby. All right, guys. So making sure we're all up. Cool. All right. Naaman Brown. Hi, welcome. Okay, guys, we are going to get started today. So welcome back to the Social Hour. Today's guest is a portrait and commercial photographer, educator, and master of light who has made a career of photographing ordinary people in extraordinary ways. In addition to creating portraits of such luminaries as Degrasse Tyson, I'm super jealous of that, by the way, and Buzz Aldrin, this Elinchrom Ambassador has taught for outlets like CreativeLive and the Portrait Masters, seen his work on the covers of magazines and in commercial advertisements for brands like Quinn Pip. I've been following his work for a long time, and I'm super duper excited to welcome him to the Social Hour today. Please join me in welcoming the lovely Felix Kunze.
Wow. Thank you for that introduction. And I'm so excited because sometimes people's eyes glaze over when I'm like talking and like enthusiastically about the scientists that I photograph. And so the fact that you picked out Degrasse Tyson, I just was like, yay! Yes!
No, I'm a really good. Complete nerd, I love it so much. He's one of my favorites. I'm always super duper grateful for any scientists who can speak so well to the public in ways that actually get people excited about science and make them want to understand it. So yeah, he's one of my favorite people.
Yes, he's really great. And you know what? He was wonderful on set.
That doesn't surprise me.
He was really lovely. Like he wasn't like making up for anything. It just didn't need to be so nice. You know, there was everyone was perfectly fine that I photographed that day, but he really stood out.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. And given his history with Carl Sagan and knowing what it means to be able to like meet those kind of people and be comfortable with them, it doesn't surprise me that he would be very like a generous person in person.
I agree. Yeah, he definitely was. Definitely was.
Yeah, I love that. We've already got so many amazing people showing up in the comments today. Ryan Flanagan also just got here. Sarah J is here. Dennis Dunbar, Emily Teague. Hi, guys. Welcome.
Hi, Emily.
The lovely Miss Teague, who I now, I have to chase her down and drag her on here as well.
Yes, you do. She's doing amazing things. I can't tell you, but she's my neighbor, so I get to see everything ahead of time.
I know, which is cheating. I feel like the rest of us just have to wait.
Yeah, she's amazing. And she helped me on my live this afternoon that I did with Elinchrom.
I saw a little bit of that. Were you photographing Brandy?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have, it's like we have this little commune here in this building in New York Brandy was my roommate for a while, and then she moved across the hall with Emily. So they've been my quarantine, my little bubble. And when we did a shoot today, we didn't have to wear masks because we're already in our, we're already.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the handiest thing
in the
ever.
last 6 months, it wasn't going to happen today.
I know. I see when you guys head off to the beach and stuff, and I'm like, man, how many fun photographer friends to quarantine with.
We make it look fun, but we are also like stuck indoors most of the week,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at least you do get to get out, so that's good. It's good for the sanity, right?
Hey, can I just say this thing? Like, everyone looks at I look at people in places like where you are with family, and like you have a house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you get to drive your car to a garage and then like put the stuff in. I have to hire like someone to wait by the car, and then 3 people to load everything through the elevator into this vehicle. Like, it's New York giveth, but it also taketh away.
Indeed it does.
Yeah.
But you get, strong leg muscles from all the stairs and all the walking, and
exactly
calluses on your feet that are huge.
And hypertension and stress. It's great.
As well.
I love New York. Yeah.
No, it's a great place to be. I've only got to be there a couple times, but there's definitely a feeling and a life in the city that you don't really get anywhere else, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we met in New York at Photo Plus.
Yep. Which is another thing we have to thank Emily for, because she's like the best introducer of people ever.
It really is. Yeah.
She is.
Yeah. And I miss conferences. And right now, the Portrait Masters conference is going on. And I was not a fan of conferences at all. Like, at all. But now in the context, I finally like really understand their function.
Yeah.
Meeting people,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody really goes to buy stuff. I know, it's just everybody's starting to miss their photo friends really, really badly.
I miss just talking to strangers like in the street, or at the store or something.
Yeah.
I'm very chatty. So I'm like, mask. Like.
I know. And then you can't, it's harder. Like, you can tell, when people smile a little bit, but you miss all the rest of the expression.
I try to smile, but it's hard.
Yeah, I do too. I overdo it sometimes because I want them to know. So I'm like, squeezing my eyes really hard, like, see, I'm happy. But you can't tell. Oh, wink, wink. Yeah. Just overdo it a little bit. Sorry, guys.
It's funny. So yeah, we have good audience.
We do. We have so many awesome people here today. So remember, guys, if you have any questions for Felix as we get into discussion, please make sure that you leave them in there so we can get to them as we go. And yeah, so Felix, I've been dying to ask you forever, what pushed you into photography in the first place?
The financial crisis, the last financial crisis. So I was one of those clicking moms without being a mom. But I had a 9-to-5, and I was always doing photography on the side. And one day I just decided, okay, that's enough. Well, actually, it goes a bit deeper. I almost died because my appendix burst, and it was a big hoo-ha. And I was
getting a little bit of crunchiness in it might be your hair. Is it your hair?
No, it's the one. I've got one weird AirPod, so I'll just use the one. Is that better?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So my appendix burst, and I had this like near-death experience, literally, and it made me realize like I should just be happy, actually, instead of sitting at the desk all day, which I do now.
Right.
But so I had been doing this hobby of photography for a while, and like so many people, I mean, I know that story completely. When you're just floating in the sea of nowhere, we're just going with the current because you have no idea what your photography career is going to end up being. And then in the first few years, you're just looking for that approval. And I really did nothing of value for the first 3 to 4 years, I would say. And kind of like there was some good images, but like I had no idea what being a photographer really meant, And then as you kind of dig into it more and more and more, any subject you learn, it's going to take you a little while to figure out like where even to go. And I think there's a couple pivotal moments, but I think the biggest one is Lindsay Adler, credit to her, introduced me to Lara Jade about 10 years ago. And that's been a really, really good friendship. And Lara's been a huge influence in my life. Just helping me. Like, she's one of the big reasons I came to New York for the first time and kind of felt like I was at home here when I first came, because she just kind of included me right away. And she also introduced me to Sue Bryce, and that's how I ended up on the Portrait Masters. So, you know, a lot of credit to her for kind of bringing me from just like floundering around to kind of taking it seriously in New York.
Right. So, God,
Yeah.
so your photography career starts with a near-death experience. So did you rationalize that any specific way? Like you said, you know, I realized I just needed to be happy. So how did you know photography was the thing?
Well, it was like the main hobby that I had on the side. And I always was really, I think there's a lot of people who have this experience where they go through, especially in their early 20s or their late teens and early 20s, where I never really fit in where I grew up. Like, I fit in New York. I love it here. That's one of the reasons I moved. But I wanted to find a way. I would go on a lot of road trips, and I'd meet a lot of people that I did like, and I wanted to find a way to kind of convey that. I mean, at the end of the day, photography is a form of communication, right? And you, like, words are hard, and conveying how you see the world by like verbal diarrhea is, I don't know. I just remembered always trying to explain. Oh my God, that pug is great.
My little squish.
Always trying to explain like the way I saw the world. And eventually I was just like, right, my interaction with people is a certain way. I'm going to photograph them a certain way. And I found myself really thinking very highly of everyone I met. Does that make sense? Like, I really felt that, like, I really thought like, wow, these people are really strong and so much stronger than me. I would always think, you know, the way you do. And then, yeah, so I guess portraiture was the thing for me. I mean, I dabbled in like doing fashion, reportage, photojournalism, all of those things, and eventually ended up at portraiture because I think it's the most interesting of all the photographic disciplines.
Yeah. Was there something already about the way that you related to people or an interest in people that made portraiture the best option for you? Or, you know, like I've been drawing faces since forever. Right. And it made sense. Like, I'm interested in story. And so it only made sense. Like, you don't have a story without a people. And so that was what always drew me to people. Was there something that made you have an interest in people to start with?
I mean, I think when you're talking about I drew faces, I think it's just a way to convey what you see in the world. I mean, it's a weird thing to say, but I was like, you know it when you have a client and they've never been photographed well before, and then you take a nice picture and you're like, this is much more of who you are. And that is something that I think I saw just because I'm fairly optimistic. I can be a cynic too, but I'm fairly optimistic. And when I meet someone that I respect, especially when you're like in your early 20s, you're like, everyone is just this amazing person.
Right. And so much cooler and better.
Yeah, exactly. And I put everyone up on a pedestal, and that's not a bad thing. And photographing them was like, I think this is a way I could show what I see in these people, you know? I don't know. It was like that. And also I thought, right, I'm going to be a great photographer and I'm going to run around the world and da-da-da. And I never thought I'd truly deep down, I never thought I'd actually get there. You know, that I'd get to do the things I get to do now.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
It was in a way out of a desire to help, a desire for connection or to be of service to people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Totally.
Sure.
Was,
yeah. Yeah. Make up some other platitudes for me to retroactively apply to myself.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question. I think, I don't know. I had this discussion with someone the other day about like traveling, right? And traveling is just a mindset. Like, I've done such cheap traveling and staying on people's sofas and stuff. Definitely from a privileged place, by the way, not financially, but just, you know, I can, like, this accent and the skin color, like it's a privilege, right? Like I have white privilege in that regard. Yeah. And then I don't know if it was like to help people. I think I was, honestly, I like to say, like, my mom used to always be like, the world doesn't revolve around you, Felix. And I'm like, well, my world does. And I think everyone's world does. Like at the end of the day, yeah, you can have these platitudes. Yes, I was trying to help people. I was trying to photograph people so that they look better, but it was my interest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's my interest. If it helps them, that's obviously, like, by its very nature, that would help somebody.
Sure.
But I think the reason I'm hesitant about it and saying it like this is because I never felt like I achieved that.
Oh,
until
okay.
I started like really taking it seriously in my like mid 20s, you know. I think when I turned 25, like around then, oh no, hang on, oh no, like mid to late 20s, I suppose. No, but there started to be stuff where I was like, oh, I started to feel like I was doing work that actually represented people that I was photographing. And at that point, I think I could probably say, oh, I did projects that help people, but I would be hesitant to ascribe that to the early part of my career because I don't think I was so, you know, you're so trying to just swim and survive that I never really got to think about those kind of things.
Yeah.
And honestly, I lost my last job in the financial crisis, you know, in 2008. So it wasn't there. Yeah, my appendix burst like, as I've often had, like really good timing. So it
if it was gonna go.
Yeah, I could have this like deep experience at the same time. But it really also brought on, it was like, I lost my job and I was like, I don't know, have you had a near-death experience?
No,
okay,
I've had like a few close calls, but nothing where I actually thought, nothing where I was conscious enough. I did have a really bad stomach infection once where I told my husband to pray for me when I was in the car and he was taking me to the hospital, but I wasn't really lucid enough to be like, oh, I am dying now.
Did you recover quite quickly?
Well, I had to be in the ER and have fluids and all that stuff, maybe within 6 to 12 hours. So.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was because I was in hospital for a week, like I was close to dying of sepsis and all of these things. So it was like the recovery process is actually what felt more like a near-death experience than the event itself.
Right.
Because I just was like, I am never gonna recover. And if I do, I will be so grateful. And then I obviously got better, but it was horrible. And I thought, right, if I'm gonna enjoy, like, right, I can worry about money and everything, because getting into photography, you don't do it for the money, you know? Don't. I mean, apart from if you follow the supervised education thing, because people on there are making money, it's like a miracle. Like I love it, you know? It's the only platform that I see where people are doing that consistently. So like, it was like, what do I want out of life? I can spend all the money, I can make all the money, but what is there at the end of the day? And I already got knee pain when I was running even back in the day. So I thought, right, my knees are going out now. Might as well go for it. You know? Having the money to go snowboarding at 65 is silly. When my knees, in my case, because I feel like my knee's definitely going to go by then. Completely, you know?
So just, you got to do all the things. I mean, I ask because I know for certain a big part of what pushed me into photography, aside from the fact that I always just loved making things, was I was getting approbation for the first time in years as a mom. I was in the military prior to that, and then I was a mom. Wow. And so it was the first time in a long time where people were saying, hey, you're really good at something. And I was like, I'm really good at something. And then, of course, like, that desire for approbation really was the driving factor, I would say, in easily the first 5 years of my career. And so I'm always curious about, like, what is it that propels people into it despite all of the hardships and all of the hurdles that, you know, exist in that path.
Right. And I think anyone that gets in, like, it's so easy to say clicking moms, but I really admire everyone that takes the path to do this thing, because it's a moonshot most of the time to make it work. And then the only requirement is persistence. Yeah. Because everyone can do it now. The resources are there for everyone to do a good job. And what is beautiful about it is in its finality, when you make nice pictures of people, even when you sell them to them, you're doing something good for people's self-esteem. You're doing something good, like it really helps people to have nice pictures taken. And every photograph you take that someone values becomes more valuable to them over time.
Oh yeah, and to their loved ones, and yeah, for sure.
So
Dennis says, don't do it for the money. There go my dreams. And my mama's here. Hi, mama.
Hi. No, but I think really, getting into, like, when I look back at it, it was such an act of faith.
Yeah.
Rather than, there was no path. Like, I'm glad I wasn't a stubborn dude, you know, because I just carried on. You know, despite all the, like, I should have quit many times if I was sensible, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you wanted to like make a good living at that point in time when you're just like scraping by. Yeah. I mean, I spent my last $200 on 28 Days with Sue. In the first year of my career, I spent my last $200 on that. I saw her speak and I was like, it was like a kick in the chest. It was like she spoke about fear and I was like, okay, you know, I will do that. I spent my last $200 and it completely changed my mindset. And it wasn't a question of, you know, a technical expertise. It was a question of mindset. It was a question of how I thought about it and how I was going to approach it. And it's, I think, so powerful for young photographers to get into that place. That's what I always found the most appealing about Sue, was that she was not going to let you bullshit. She was going to make sure you knew the truth and make sure you faced it so that you could move forward. And that is something we don't get enough, because everybody wants technique, right? Everybody wants to learn how to do the cool thing. And nobody really takes the time to ask why they want to do that and why they want to take photographs in the first place and where they're trying to go.
Yeah, and so you actually, yeah, I guess that really is the perfect like answer to your question. I don't think I thought about those kind of things until I met Sue. You know, I thought about like she's the only, anyway, I've got my class on Sue's platform. I'm grateful for the fact that she does all of that, because I can just teach technique, because I'm not as good at any of that stuff as she is.
I think there's not many people who are.
No, I mean, for anyone that's watching that doesn't know, I remember the first video I ever watched, I talked about this earlier, of Sue, is she's talking about a family portrait, and she's like zooming in on the kids or showing how the kids, they both look like, you know, and she goes, but I sold the image because mom looks great. And then she's like, that's what matters. And it was like, it's a silly example, but she will just lay the truth on you
right
every single time. And I mean, I've heard her talk about self-medication, she has a great talk on values, on valuing yourself. She talks about the whole gambit. So she's going to break through any of the barriers that you have to selling. Because, oh yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, in the first few years, it's such a curse, because you don't know what you're doing technically, and you don't know what you're doing business-wise. And then you have all this shame about money, because I couldn't ask for money to save my life, literally, right? I was like, oh, but what if they don't like me because I asked for money? Yeah, and I got over all of that, but I really had to work through those things, you know. And Sue, if I'd met Sue earlier, would have been like that.
Yeah, that's why I feel like these conversations are so valuable, because there's so many people out there that their only exposure to you is through teaching. And of course, you're an amazing photographer. And so they're like, oh, here's Felix, right? He's here and here's me. And he must have something special that I don't have to be up there. And the truth is, everybody who's gotten anywhere has done it by clawing their way through their own issues. Like, that's the only way up there.
And the amazing thing about it, I've been thinking about this a lot, but you know what emergent behavior is?
Yes.
So, yeah, of course I figured. So an anthill ants aren't like the super intelligent species necessarily. They follow pheromone trails of each other, and it's actually a bunch of random motion that with a few rules that they have, like if they find this smell, they go in this direction and find this resource and bring it back to here. Like there's just a few of those rules. And with that, they're probably one of the most successful species on the planet. And so what you have is a lot of chaos, but an order emerges because you have these rules and patterns that you have. It's called emergent behaviors, right? Intelligence is just an emergent quality of solving many, many problems and being right more than half of the time, right? And the same is true for a photographic style. Like it isn't about defining your photographic style ahead of time. You just shoot, 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 and make yourself so busy with shooting, whether you're getting paid or not, that you don't have a choice but to make the choices that get your work through and done and published. And by the end, you look back at that work and go, oh, that is my style.
I think that's interesting. At some point, we'll have to talk about, there's a few theories around the emergence of consciousness and quantum theory, which is super, super interesting to me. The idea that maybe consciousness is a quantum field that we only have access to once we pass a certain level of complexity. So really, really interesting ideas.
It's a fractal, right? Like it's the more simple you get, like you get more simple, but also more complex in quantum physics. Like the more you go down into explaining it, the more complex it gets.
Yes, which is true. So at some point that would be a fun conversation.
Now our next guest, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Right? I should just see, like maybe he would. Yeah. But with that idea of defining your style, there are some people who've been shooting for decades and never really develop anything that's visually coherent. Do you think that's from a lack of like focused practice, or maybe from not ever really intending to?
So that's what I was going to say about, if you look back, like if you read Richard Branson's autobiographies or any of the people that have made it, what you find is that they have themes that go throughout their life, right? Mine, their careers. I think the one that I've identified for myself is that I'm really interested in economics, and I'm really interested in like these kind of scientific things and statistics and probabilities. And what I always told myself is that I don't need to be that great. I just need to be 1% better than 50% of the people, or something like that. I don't know if that works statistically, but I just need to do a little bit more. So I always looked for, where can I add a little bit more production value, right? So if you look at my work now, that's exactly where I've ended up. I took this picture. Let me pull it up here. Maybe a good way of explaining it. I'm tapping around on my iPad here. I always had this idea. No, but truly, like, okay, I was chasing, where can I find the production value? Where can I find the production value? And it's not that, like, I started looking for families that could afford me to do family portraits back when I was doing a lot of that, but also families that I felt like they kind of got it a little bit, like understood it, that I could do something really interesting with them and they'd be on board. And it wasn't really a financial decision, more of like, this is where I can add value. If I go to this location, then I can do this thing that gives the image a little bit more of a feeling.
So you're frozen for me here.
Yes, same on this side. Can I join this back in?
I think so.
With the meeting code, let me, I'm also frozen. So let me quit this app and then I'll be right back.
Okay, we'll get you back in.
Okay.
For all of the guests who are here, guys, don't forget that we can do questions. So if you guys have any questions for Felix, make sure that you ask them so that we have time to get them in. I have a feeling we're going to be having all kinds of great conversations in here. So yes, Dennis, absolutely right. Anyone with their own business must face their own issues, which is good news because you do see more success when you do. 100% agree. And it's not always an easy process, and we don't always realize that we have to do that. So being able to hear people like Felix talk about the ability to do that can be so incredibly powerful for people who don't realize that that's an issue. Hi, friend, you're back. All right, let's see.
Okay, should we try that again? Let me see. I'm going to try one more time.
Okay, let's see if we can do it.
It's saying that only the host can share in this.
Okay, okay. Let me get you in there. Let's see.
Well, if you go, are you able to pull up my Instagram?
I sure am.
If you scroll down a little bit to this picture, this one.
Yep. I love that. Also, they're fantastic. And she is
brilliant.
Such a doll.
She's brilliant, honestly. They're both brilliant as the British definition of something's just amazing, but also meant like as intellectuals, brilliant.
Yes.
So that one is a good example of, if you go to my Instagram, probably can look, zoom in on it. That
it's
one's a really good example. Yeah, it's the same shot. Yeah. Just open it up again, Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, perfect. That one is a really good example because if you think about it, like, oh yeah, perfect. Great image, right? Must be a wonderful photographer that took that, like you said. But what's actually happening is that I've got a little bit of knowledge in how to light on location in a way that looks a bit natural. Maybe some people would criticize it, but what is making this image great is the fact that it's on the Nile River in Egypt on a beautiful Sahara sand night with two portrait subjects. She's the vintage Egyptologist on Instagram, and he's the professor of Egyptology at Yale. And they brought me out to Egypt to photograph their expedition. We did a lot of like work with the expedition, not just glamour shots. And they dress like this. They're vintage fashion aficionados. And that's where the production value is.
Right.
You know, like, and I've been seeking those kind of projects for so long that it kind of like makes sense that I ended up in that place. But that's not about lights. That's not about fancy invoicing software or cardstock business cards or any of that. It's that like one quality that I was seeking. Okay, do a little bit better than everybody else. Work a little bit harder than everybody else. You don't need to work your fingers to the bone. You just need to work a little bit harder than everyone else. And you don't need to worry about that so much if you're passionate about what you're doing, because you'll then work harder than everyone else without even knowing it, right?
Right.
Secondly, add a little bit of production value. And then thirdly, work on your own shit. If you're bad at dealing with money, asking for money, work on it, you know? Don't take criticism from strangers, but your friends, ask them for that kind of input. Hang out with people who will tell you, not that you're a piece of blah, but just, hey, this is something that I think would really help you, you know? And I've been lucky to be surrounded by those kind of people. Like Sue talks the talk. She'll be like, Felix, you have a problem with this. And I'm like, okay, I guess she knows, you know? Then, but so what I'm saying is you have to have principles, I think, to do anything. But and that's why I think any style, any career success, everything like that is an emergent quality, something that comes out of the chaos of every day. I mean, you know how it feels. You're sitting at your desk day after day doing random tasks that seem to lead nowhere. And all of a sudden you look back 10 years later and there's something that you've built. You don't notice day to day. So that's what emergence is. Something comes out of all of that random motion, you know?
Right. So being able to, do you think that in order for something positive to emerge out of these behaviors over time, they have to be focused toward a single goal? Yeah. Like to be a successful photographer or to have a career, or that just the behaviors themselves propagate this kind of thing? Because it seems like
that's a chicken and the egg.
For practice to matter, it needs to have some kind of goal, right? I mean, you do a lot of lighting work, even still practice on, light tests or things like that. I mean, that is directed practice, right?
But think about it like this. I think, but you might end up doing something without having too much of a goal in mind beforehand. And that's actually okay, because as long as you can listen to what you want I think a broad goal helps, right? A purpose. yeah, I guess the goal is the most important thing at the top, but sometimes it's really hard to define that. You know,
True.
sometimes maybe you're working on just like a little project and the goal comes when you've been doing it for 100 hours. You know, like, oh, I've been interested in this thing. I maybe wasn't sure why. Maybe I was doing, you know, I don't know, photographing whirling dervishes. I don't know. Like, I don't know why. And then you realize, oh, it's actually, I love this culture or blah, blah. You end up realizing that a little bit later. The pieces kind of come together, you know. I did 3 live interviews today, not for any particular goal. You know what I mean? Just because I'm like, I guess that's something to do because it like gets these kind of conversations going, but there's not a particular goal. But it does fit into the broad scheme of things, right?
Sure. I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead. I guess your point you were saying about the people who've been shooting for such a long time and don't seem to get anywhere. I mean, maybe their goal is to have something that is reliable and easy and that they can shoot over and over, you know?
Sure.
And I think, yeah, so that's okay, right?
Yeah. I guess what it comes down to, yeah, I think what it comes down to for a lot of people is that they have a something that they know that they want, and maybe it is to be, you know, a recognized photographer. They want to be appreciated and they want to do well and they want to be, you know, known and make all of the things and for people to love them. I'm not saying that's me, but you know, it might be.
But it's all of us, yeah.
Right. But you don't feel like, I remember that feeling of not, like I wasn't getting anywhere, right? Like I'm doing all of these things, I'm not seeing the progress I want, and you feel like maybe you're missing some component of putting all of this together. Like, am I, and for me, I discovered over time, I wasn't meeting people. I wasn't expanding my circle of acquaintance. I was not networking. I was not, and it's not even just that sometimes that networking exposes you to new opportunities, but it's new ways of thinking and new ways to approach my work or think about myself. I mean, those things I think have probably made some of the biggest differences in my career. And I think being in that place of, I guess what I want to know is there advice that you would give to photographers who they know they want to get somewhere, but they're missing something in that process and they don't know what it is yet? Is there a way to look for that?
Most people that I've met who are in that situation are worrying about that far too early on. Right? And then probably there's a second category that have been at this for a while. And I think something you said made me think about moving to New York City has been a really big part of that for me. And it's like, I met Lara Jade, but she's from England. I met Lindsay, she's from upstate New York, I think. You know, I met these kind of people that weren't even like necessarily that much connected with New York. Like it wasn't because I was in New York that I met them, but it's just the mindset of New York makes it so that you can meet people, right? And that for me has been that answer to, how do I expand my thinking? How do I broaden my horizons? How do I do all of that? And it's not like I'm constantly networking here. And I almost feel like the networking I did do when I first came here 8 years ago was so much more fervent and like all over the place. But you're right, like you end up being confronted with lots of different, New York is such a hodgepodge that you can't help but to be like completely open all the time, consciously and subconsciously, to new experiences, different kind of people, and wanting to kind of photograph some of that and try to get it into something cohesive, I guess, as a portrait photographer.
Sure.
I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I think anyone who's in the rut after 10 years of doing this, supervised education might be the place, you know. Have I talked to you ever about this book on being a photographer?
I've heard you mention it before.
Yeah, it's written by a professor of photography and like a photojournalist, and they teamed up and discussed kind of the path that photographers take. And there's a great example of like, what is the best photographer in the world? And it's a mother who takes a picture on her little camera and shares it with the family who, because she knows the subject matter intimately. She shares it with an audience that absolutely appreciates the photograph in every which way it could possibly be appreciated. And that's all that the job of a photographer is, right? The difference between someone who's making commercial jobs happen or has a large following is just the scope. You have maybe more things you're knowledgeable about, or you know more about an area. Like I'm really interested in scientists, explorers, astronauts, that kind of thing. And then your audience for that who appreciates it is bigger. And of course, the better your work is, the bigger the audience that appreciates it is going to be. The audience in this case is behind me. I don't know why.
Like they do.
Yeah, like they do. So I think that's the simplest way of looking at it. And if you're stuck and not getting anywhere, you either got to change your subject matter or get the feedback from the people who matter, you know? And I want to say the people who matter are not other photographers. They're your clients. Yeah. Like I have my Facebook group, Lighting with Felix Kunze. We actually kind of like everyone, I can't get rid of it completely, but I wish there was just like no one would ever ask for critique. Because we've
had this conversation before.
We chatted about this. Yes. I think we reduce everyone to the lowest common denominator. And if you have someone, let's say you have someone on the moon, right? On Mars, let's say we have a fictional race of whatever on Mars, just so we don't lump anyone on Earth into this. And they're photographing just the ugliest work. And you're like, what is happening? Why is this so objectively unaesthetically pleasing? But they turn around and go, well, hang on, I'm selling $100,000, a month, whatever. I don't know. They really like it. I'm on the cover of every magazine, blah, blah. Who are we to say no, you know? And that's why I think the feedback that matters is from, like, is your work resonating with the people that you intend for it to resonate with? That's it.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, that's what matters. But I think the question becomes when we're talking about, so I think you have to consider who you're getting critique from and whether or not that's something that should matter to you. Like, you talked before about, your close group of people, the people who tell you the truth, the people who do that for you. And of course, I think we should take feedback from those people, the people we respect, especially if they have, an aesthetic, if we think that their work is the kind of thing we aspire to be able to create and we trust them. A lot of times what I think it does is just helps you see better. And it's not,
right.
It's not like, tell me if I did a good job, but I can feel something is off here. And I used to get that from Carrie Bean for retouching advice. I would know that what I was making didn't look like what I saw, what I aspired to make. And I didn't know what was holding me back because I just hadn't had enough time to train my eye to recognize that yet. And so hopefully, at least from my point of view, that's really all that kind of critique is meant to be is, well, this is really close. It's just that your posing is making your subject look a little awkward. If you were to turn them this way, I think you'd get what you want. And of course, that's predicated upon knowing what the person is after, right? Like knowing what they want from the critique. But
you have to get that from someone you trust, right? And And so what I encourage people to do instead is say, here's what I set out to do. Here's what I achieved. Here's what I struggled with. And here's what works. Here, I have this, then I'd be like, if someone said like, I don't understand. I think this is a great image. What is it that doesn't work for you? But you've given all that other context, right? Like, here's what I did with the styling. Here's what I did with the location. Here's where I am at in my journey as a photographer, right? Because that's all the things that if you wanted to get advice from strangers, you would need to convey to someone. Sure. And then ask very specific questions. And that's the most productive. So I've never, ever put my work up for critique ever, anywhere. And I have a very, very close friend who's also a photographer, and the style is very different from mine. And we've had the following conversation several times. I'd be like, what do you think about this image? And he's like, literally like, look, we have such different styles. And sometimes I don't understand what you're doing, but it doesn't matter at all because you're like doing just fine.
Right.
Yeah. And I like, yeah, maybe like critique from someone that you trust, and maybe you don't have anyone in that industry. So then I get it, you know, like maybe you don't know that many people.
Sure.
I get it. Then you go to groups on Facebook, that's totally fine. But at the end of the day, the biggest critique is if you're shooting for someone that maybe paying you or is giving you feedback in some other way, if they like it, great, carry on. If they don't,
Sure.
change it. And trust me, I had the don't many, many times, you know, I still have it.
Sure.
Maybe like, okay, client doesn't like it. And okay, I'm like, I have to go to the next project. Sorry, I can't go my bedroom and cry because I'd rather go to sleep and work on the next thing.
I definitely want to go in my bedroom and cry. But I mean, you did mention before that as the quality of your work increases, your audience, your potential audience for that work increases as well, right? And sometimes, at least from my experience, I think maybe the trick is teaching people how to receive critique, especially if you're putting it before a wide audience and you're going to get so many different varied responses, right? But sometimes, almost statistically, you can start to pull things back from that. And this is something that writers, as a writer, you're forced to do this. You must get critique. And that's because you don't know what you don't know, and you're too close to your writing in order to parse out some of the things that you have a habit of, and you don't realize how that's necessarily coming across to the reader.
But
and
there
are
going
times
to people that you know are good writers.
Yeah, or an editor.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, that's
maybe
a completely
that's
different thing.
when people are going in your group, I think looking at the overall quality of the work there, they're probably making that assumption. These guys are pretty awesome. Maybe they're going to give me, you know.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
But if you look at that as a whole, a lot of times you can kind of, you can pick pieces, right? Like there seems to be a pattern here. A lot of people are saying it's overexposed. Or there seems to be a pattern here. A lot of people are saying, you know, the expression looks really stiff. And so, of course, you choose how to put that, whether or not to take that. But
you have an underexposed image, right? And someone puts it up and says, blah, blah. And then I just reply like, hey, I think you're still going to have that same moody look that you're going for, even if you bring the exposure up another stop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whereas I think what critique has turned into in our modern society, the dumpster fire that we are living in, is like the trolls on Instagram, blah, blah. So you're probably right. Like within the silo of like the Facebook group, I mean, it's a fantastic, like, can I just tell you a little story of what happened yesterday?
Yes.
Did you see this? Did you see this?
No.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so we had a guy who is like not, you know, he's just starting out, and he's like, hey, can anyone share some tips from Facebook? Because I can't afford the lighting series, so I wanted to get some tips. And then people were like, this is Felix's intellectual property, how dare you, da, da, da. And I was like, no, he's already in the group. Like, I don't think if he's trying to steal, I don't think he's posting it like in my Facebook group. And then it was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to go in here and moderate, and like, oh, the comments. And I was like, it's actually out at my friend's birthday party, and I snuck away, and I was like, okay, looking through. And then I saw this, Anna Soriano, she's a photographer in Vancouver, in BC and Canada. And she's like, look, I will donate half the price of the lighting series. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. Like, I got chills. And then what I said is, I messaged Anna, and I'm like, why don't we start a little scholarship? Like people, and then like, because people were like, I will donate. And I'm like, okay, we'll start a little scholarship, and then I will match a certain amount, and I'll get the Portrait Masters to do the same, but they're right now in the conference, so I'm like, I'll speak to them about it afterwards. And so we raised like $1,200 overnight.
Oh my gosh!
And so the group is fantastic. I definitely, I think you've actually given me a little bit of a different viewpoint about it, because you're right. When people are coming into the group saying, they're asking for critique, then you're right. They are probably thinking that they are already in that place, and for the most part, they are. And
there's so many amazing photographers in that group who I think.
But there's also a lot of fantastic community of people who don't tear you down.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing, which is why we do the Photographers Roundtable, which is basically just a critique show, because we know that there are people who they want feedback and they have something that they're looking for. And there are 5 of us, and we're all in different genres. Well, some of us are pretty close, but we're all in a place where we can come at things from a different perspective based on, you know, and if we can look at a photo and say, this looks like you're really going for something commercial. And this is, you know, and then when they get that feedback and they're like, well, that wasn't meant to be commercial at all, that tells you something, right? I mean, if you have at least that baseline knowledge, that can give you hints of whether or not you're actually achieving what you set out to do. So,
but I
and
guess
then we encourage them,
it.
you know, oh, that's okay. I mean, it just, but it's, you know, that's kind of, the goal is
I'm guessing
healthy critique.
Right. I'm guessing you guys aren't being dicks about it.
No.
Yeah. Like you have to remember when I was starting out, there was no Sue Bryce. There was no, it was all guys who were like bunch of dudes sitting around like, did you go skiing on the water because your horizon's so off? And I was like, oh God, this is awful. Like it's just toxic masculinity, which is, you know, what I was really trying to do. And Sue's mission also was like, let's teach it at a place where people like, this is some people's lives, you know, and like photographers can really bring value to the world. And this whole like, to be a photographer, you need to know all this. And, you know, if you don't know, if you're not a mathematician and a magician and you
can't
put up
call yourself a photographer.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And that's where I grew up. So that's where my whole like, let's get away from this and just support each other. Cause I've seen a lot of people get really, become really good photographers just by people like saying like, oh, I think if you bring your exposure up, your screen is probably set too bright, you know, test it on your phone. They're like, oh my God, you solved this to me, blah, blah. Like, that's brilliant, you know?
Yeah, agreed. And that's hopefully, and we'll get to questions, guys, in just a second. That's hopefully what it should be. I mean, if you're going to be in a community, there's no reason to be there if you're not supporting the community because you benefit from the community. So if you're not, why are you there? To make yourself feel good, right? By tearing other people down, that's when we make them go away. Bye.
Yeah, I mean, I have a one strike policy. It's like very famous for that in the, and I've been given shit for it. I'm like, no, if you're an asshole, you're out. That's it.
That is the social consequences for bad behavior. That's what that is meant to be. We're meant to be like, hey, you can't do this, guy. And then you do it again and bye, that's the consequences. Hopefully next time you decide not to be an asshole. Like that's how that is supposed to work.
I mean, I even take it, if you give your subjective opinion in my group, I will look up your name and see if you keep doing that, you're out. Like you have to be objective about it. You know? Like, I don't like it. Like that's not a good feedback, or doesn't work for me. Like that's not critique, that's not feedback. No one can be helped by that.
No.
You know, if you say, oh, it doesn't read well with me because it's underexposed, good, objective feedback, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And I think sometimes it's fair to say, and we will do this sometimes when we're critiquing an image and say, you know, I think you could probably try this, but to be fair, that's a personal preference of mine and it may not work for you. Like I would go this way, but that's my thing. And so it might not be yours and that's totally fair.
Yeah. But so just to kind of put a bookend on this, I think at the end of the day, all of that is valid. And like we've now had a nuanced conversation about it and I really learned something. But the ultimate test, if you're dealing with clients, is your checkbook.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't matter how much, but if you're exchanging something of value and getting something of value back, that is your biggest critique. If that is happening, you don't need to run around and look for more recognition in other places.
Right. And maybe
if it's not happening.
And if you get to a place where you're plateauing, right, and you're maybe not bringing in, or you can't raise your prices the way you'd like to, or then maybe it's time to think about, okay, what's stopping me there? Could it potentially be my work? And if it is, be careful about, you know.
The idea of like, let's find out what's stopping me precludes awareness of what's stopping you, and most people are not there, right? Or like if something's stopping me, I'm not there knowing what it is, because if I did, that would just change it. Right. So the key thing, that mantra that I tell myself is if it's not working and you're not where you want to be, change something.
Yeah. How do you go about deciding what to change? Do you pick a random thing or do you have a process for that?
I mean, what are your normal routines? What are your habits? Disrupt one of them, you know? I mean, in lockdown, I've lost 30 pounds.
Oh, shut up.
Sorted out. I know, I saw your comment. I sorted out my sleep schedule, but these are all like little things. Like a lot of people, like I've been there, I wasn't happy. Okay, change something,
right?
You know, and you don't know. I mean, I spent a lot of time not being happy, and I changed things and it wouldn't work, and changed something else, and diet and exercise, and eventually something clicked, you know. But
no, that's a good point. That's a good point.
One thing at a time.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get to a couple questions real quick.
Okay.
So Simone says, what does Felix think was the most valuable advice he has ever received that helped him become the photographer he is now?
Okay, so Nick Rogers, who is a great photographer, an old friend of mine, he was for a while Annie Leibovitz's first assistant. He said to me the best phrase ever, which is, live a good life and photograph the people in it. And I was like, okay, yeah.
I love
that.
And
it just kind of encapsulated like the idea of, okay, you also need to have people that you've got to photograph in your life, you know?
Yeah.
As a portrait photographer, it's about that connection with other people.
Agreed. When I talked to Simone, he asked me the ending question, how do you want to be remembered? And I was just like, as a good person. Like, that's my main.
I should have said that.
That's my main thing, you know, because everything else I do will stem from that, if that is the result. So I love that quote. I feel like that is as accurate, you know. Ryan Flanagan says, as a researcher, I greatly admire the work displaying those subjects. When photographing those kind of subjects, do they find a desire to better understand the work they do? Did you understand that question?
I wonder if he means like to better able to communicate the work they do.
When photographing those kind of subjects, do you find a desire to better understand the work they do?
Yes,
is I think what he was getting after.
Absolutely. So I think he's referring to a lot of the like scientific work that I've been doing, or like photographing explorers and things, you know, like astronauts and Neil deGrasse Tyson. We started with that theme. I have I've been posting a lot of the team members from the expedition I did in Egypt. So we have like people studying ancient amphora and like ancient bio remains, like skulls, you know. So have a look on my Instagram for that. Yeah, skeletons, exactly. And so I'll use the example of when I went to Mongolia. I was there for 3 weeks, and we're studying a geological section from the late Devonian, 365 million years ago. There was a mass extinction. Yeah, you do. Yeah, I figured. Well,
I don't. I was being completely sarcastic.
Oh, okay. I was like, yeah, I figured, but I'm still going to explain it.
No, do explain it.
365 million years ago, there was a mass extinction. This was around the time when sharks, you know, like evolved, and trees were just starting to be a thing, and there was a mass extinction. So a lot of species died out, like any mass extinction. Lots of things die, and it is caused by an event. And we're studying it because it has parallels to what's happening now. Like, you can actually see in the fossil record what, for example, algae forms after a lot of marine species die out, because algae is takes the space of other organisms. So when you have a big layer of algae in the fossil record, you know that there was an extinction beforehand. So when we're seeing algal blooms now happening all over the place, we know we're kind of getting into this mass extinction event. Anyway, it can get very nerdy. But I went out to Mongolia and I photographed this big team. If you go through my Instagram, it's also on there, of geologists in different places. And what I always say is, like, photography is this way for me to access many different fields without getting a PhD in them. So I got a 3-week solid kind of background on like some geology, and I got to really see it, and I got to deal with people, but I also didn't have any of the pressure to like really understand it. There was no test at the end. So I got to dive exactly as far into it as I wanted to. So, you know, I'm not interested enough in geology to get a PhD, but I'm interested enough to photograph people. And that's a really interesting thing. And I definitely find that for all my subjects. And I think it's also almost required that I know a little bit about the people I'm photographing.
Yeah, I love that. That definitely resonates with me a lot. The reason I create photographs is because I have things in my head that I want to get out there. So I'm certainly not trying to I'm not interested really. I mean, not that I'm not interested. My main purpose is not to capture people. It's to do my own thing. However, that is what this is. That is in a big way what this interview show is my opportunity to get exposure to these people I admire and hear about the way that they think and how they approach things. And I mean, it absolutely, there's something really powerful in that. And now it makes me a little bit jealous, Felix.
I think photography is the only place that you get to do this. Like, I don't have an agenda when I go there. A journalist even has to get a story. I don't, you know?
Right.
If I go, I just have to get nice pictures. They don't even, like, they have a bias. All media has a bias.
Sure.
But I can take the picture that I perceive, because even then it's just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't matter if it's not the true full picture, because a photograph can never be the true full picture of somebody.
No. Yeah. It's really interesting that you mentioned that too, because the inherent bias of photography, I think that's one of the reasons people get so upset, because we have this perception that photography is meant to be objective. Like, whatever you captured is the thing, right? And it's not at all. It 100% is down to the person and their biases and how they perceive and react to the environment around them. And the way that you photograph the people you photograph shows a clear respect for the person that you're shooting. And that's kind of, I was going to say endemic, and that is not the word that I meant at all. Implicit, thank you. And that's implicit, I feel like, for anybody who has at least a little bit of, visual acuity.
But that's what images. We go back to this emergent idea. It's not something you choose. You throw yourself at a subject and then you get something, and that is a reflection of you, whether you try or not. Right? Like,
good point.
Yeah. Like, I'm not aware of anything that I do that makes my work particularly like mine.
Right.
The lighting is probably the closest to it that we can get, but in terms of how my subjects are, but it comes down to, like, if you look through my Instagram, like, people have a similar expression, like, I'm looking for that stoic moment.
Right.
That's not that they didn't smile or like didn't do something else, but I'm just not picking those moments because of like how I like to edit my images.
Sure.
You know?
So do you think, and I remember we had something similar to this conversation quickly at some point in the past about this idea of, finding your style and just, going at it until something emerges. And I think over the last year or so is when the work that I would consider the most particularly my own really started to come together. And a big part of that, strangely enough, was that my littlest guy started kindergarten. So he was out of the house and I had a garage that I could shoot in whenever I wanted to. And the biggest changes in my work happened then. And I don't entirely know, which I'm sure probably 15 years from now, I'll look back and be like, oh, this was the thing in hindsight. But I don't know what it is about that change, but that was when I ended up with the most cohesive amount of work that I've created. And that was me slogging through 50 different genres. That was starting with, families and weddings and babies and baptisms and bees and just anything I could shoot and get my hands on, and, just going everywhere. Yeah. Power lines,
And alliteration and elephant.
It was. And ridiculous. I was like, oh, look at these power lines against the sky, but make it art. Like, oh, here's a bee on a flower, but make it art. And it wasn't until recently that started to happen. And I don't, is that an emergent thing? Or did something else pop in that threw off my groove or my mindset? Or, I mean, I don't even know if there's a way.
Like, you're making my point of just, if you're maybe a little bit stuck, a change is what is required.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair,
I mean, it helps that you have a garage to shoot in.
And I move often. So every few years as a military family, we move. But yeah, definitely like those changes that pop in and just and just shift things. It's crazy. And to your earlier point, none of that would have happened if I didn't stick it out, right? Like if I had not kept going and I had quit 4 or 5 years into it.
Have you read The Alchemist?
Yes.
It is great. It is a little, almost too frou-frou-y for me, you know, like I'm not a big...
Yeah, it's a little, but still very good.
But Jesus, it's really true. The universe conspires to those, what is it? The universe conspires to... I've just always found it to be true. Like if you put your intention out for something, it, like all the vision boards and everything, I can roll my eyes for days, but heck, it works.
It does.
Like
it does.
You write something down and then you find it later, 10 years later, when you're looking through your notes and like, oh my God, this is the moment where I put that into motion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So. I mean, I think that's really just it's a way to crystallize your intention. And if you can change the way that you think, then you change the way that you behave. And if you change the way that you behave, then what you start putting out changes the way people react to you. I mean, it's all, what's the saying? Watch the way you think, it becomes the way you speak. Watch the way you speak, it becomes the way you act. Watch the way you act, it becomes your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. And that really, and it all starts in here. And that a vision board or whatever is just a physical manifestation of intent, right? So
yeah,
totally.
Beingness becomes before doingness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Emily would like to know, is there a scientist, a humanitarian, or other person? I refuse
to answer questions from that cretin. I will go over there and tell her myself. No.
Cretin, Emily, did you hear that?
I love Emily. She's my neighbor, so that's a joke. What did you say? Sorry.
She would like to know if there is a scientist, humanitarian, or other person that's on your list of dream people to photograph.
Yes, I actually, so at the Explorers Club dinner that was supposed to happen in 2020, but it didn't. Don't know why. No, because of COVID. They were going to have, what's her name? God, now she's the lady with the gorillas. Jane.
Oh, Jane Goodall?
Jane Goodall. There you go.
Yes.
This is why I'm like, oh my God, I forgot her name when I'm just naming her. She's been someone I've wanted to photograph for ages. There we go. And that's very cute. Is this the one that went to kindergarten now?
Yes.
You see, it all ties together so nicely. I love this kind of stuff because it's so cute.
That's real life, man. It's real life.
Very good. Very good.
So Jane.
Jane Goodall is on the list. I think she's really like such an inspiration. I want to do a lot more of the space people, but there's a lot of people who are like gonna be big names in that. And going to space and like, you know, that's a big new frontier. But generally I've been focusing a lot more on environmentalists and geologists, environmentalists and conservationists and people who are really pushing things forward, you know?
Right.
So I've been so inspired. I had Greta Thunberg on my list.
I saw.
Activists in general. And then she came to New York and I was like, right, I guess I'll go down there and just figure it out.
Yeah.
I did. So, yeah, it's funny because the picture of the Apollo astronauts, I don't know, if you go to my Instagram, I photographed 8 of the 11 remaining or surviving Apollo astronauts.
Yes,
in
let's
one
grab
group
them real
picture.
quick so everybody can see.
That's been like an opener of doors unlike anything else. So if I really like have someone on my list, there's really not much of a barrier anymore, you know?
Right.
Let's see, I will stop you when we get there. I think you also shared it with the announcement, right?
I did. Yes. Aha.
Yeah, keep going. Found it. There it is. So that's there's Buzz Aldrin and yeah, Jim Lovell's not on there, but I photographed also Jim Lovell. So I've actually photographed 9 of the 11 remaining surviving Apollo astronauts. So
achievement unlocked.
Yeah, I'm like, well, Buzz Aldrin would have definitely been on the list, but you know, I put the list together because people asked me, and then the next year I'm like, oh, that just fit them all, and that's the power of like this eye rolling but true Power of manifestation.
Right. Yeah, no, it's 100% a thing. Having that intention really bleeds into the rest of your life and how you approach things and what you go after, and
yeah,
absolutely does.
Yeah, I had an interview the other day where we talked about like I made the point that for photographers, the challenge really isn't equipment or lighting or makeup or styling or space or any of these things, but it becomes at some point about access.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's a really good point.
Like, you know, if I just, now I'm in this place where I need to do everything so that the access is easier. That people say yes when I ask if I can photograph them. And then I do a lot of personal work that is like work that I just do that I pay for, or I don't get paid for. Most of the time it's the former, you know, I have to travel to the place, and that always gets me commercial work, you know. So yeah.
I have a pug butt back here, sissy.
Pug butt. It's all good.
So is there something for people who need to get to that point of access? I mean, are there specific things that they can do? Are there ways that they can approach, you know, moving in that path to be able to start to have access to people?
Yes. So this formula, remember we talked about the mother on the beach photographing her child, and it's appreciated. So I remember I did this talk with Phase 1 in LA, and I talked about like how to choose what you're going to be photographing. And the thing about it is you have to choose what you are passionate about in your life.
Right.
What do you know something about? And then bring those into your work. So I had this big audience, and I asked them, what do you guys, can someone name something passionate about? So I picked out this lady in the front who was like, I love elephants. Like, oh God, how do I twist this? And then I realized,
I really painted myself into a corner here.
Yeah, I painted myself. I dug my own grave. And I asked her, well, what do you like about elephants? And she goes, well, they're so graceful and beautiful. And even though they are big, they're like confident and whatever. And I said, okay, good. Photograph that in people. And she's like, oh, yeah. I think that also is something that you end up not having necessarily, you don't know that right away, right? Like it takes a lot of self-reflection to figure that out. But if you studied, for example, if you studied finance in school, but you're just dead bored with it, well, you still have an interest in that and you still know something about it, maybe you can do what Sebastião Salgado did. You know, he's a fantastic photographer who was studying anthropology and had a background in economics, and like studied the movement of people and how that affected it. But he also had a keen interest in infrastructure and understood a lot of how those things interact with each other. So the pictures that he took really are, the project that he chose have to do with what his core competency was.
Sure.
Dancers are going to be great dance photographers. You know, I mean, if you picture me and Lara Jade walking down the street, you can pick out the fashion photographer in a second. It ain't me. You know what I mean? So like people stick close to, like you have a core competency, you have things that you're interested in, chase those things. That's how you end up enjoying your work. That's how you end up getting access to places where your passion really comes through. I mean, I've been shooting for the Explorers Club, the annual dinner, for 5 years for free. You know, we sell prints to try to make up the cost of the shoot, but I pay all my crew. It's like a, you know, multi-$1,000 project each time.
Sure.
For 5 years, the astronaut picture I took on the 5th year, that's how long it took me to get the trust, and rightly so. You know, these are like some of the most important people on the planet. They shouldn't just be lopped off to anyone. And so I just worked on those personal projects, and I'm always chasing like, look, all I want is to be able to get in. And that's gotten easier over time, you know? Yeah.
So for people who, I know, at least for me, it took years and years of just trying the different things, eventually to find what I feel like I'm supposed to be shooting. It took trying fashion and beauty and portraiture and weddings and just everything else. Is there a way that people can start to distill what they care about enough to make it that kind of a commitment. Because it took a friend of mine. So even though I'm doing now mostly what I want to do, it took a friend of mine asking me why backwards over and over again. So I would say, you know, well, it's because I like this thing. And he's like, yeah, but why? You know, but why do you like that? Well, why?
Don't you have a 4-year-old to do that for you?
Yeah, right. He's not quite that, you know, deep into philosophy yet, but I mean, he could be. Yeah, but it took that to get to that point.
Right. I wonder if you share this link. I just sent you a link in Facebook chat.
Okay.
That's the link to the book I was mentioning, because that's the one that really clarified this for me.
Right.
That I've been recommending for everybody, because that's the book that set me on the path of get the Kindle edition. It's not long. That set me on the path of, okay, I got to do personal projects. Otherwise, no client is going to hire you to shoot something you haven't already shot. So you might as well get shooting things you haven't already shot, because otherwise you're further back even, right? Clients, I always tell the story. I hope Lara doesn't mind. She got a job for a fashion campaign for a brand in England where they were shooting on a merry-go-round, like a Ferris wheel. No, not a Ferris wheel. What is it called in American English? Merry-go-round?
Merry-go-round, yeah.
Okay.
With the horses.
Ferris wheel.
And
no,
Ferris wheel goes up and down, merry-go-round with the horses and everything else.
Whatever, carousel.
Oh, okay. It's still the same.
Okay, yeah, anyway, it's getting late. So she had done a shoot of a model on her own time in Coney Island on a merry-go-round. And then the brand, I just always joke, they found the top merry-go-round photographer in all of England. But it's because she had done it once, you know? So then they hired her, but like no client's gonna hire you for something you didn't do. And that's why I do so much personal work, because I wanna make sure like I get exposed to lots of things and it helps me open up access.
That's a really good point. So people shoot what you want to be shooting, even if you have to make it yourself. Yeah.
Or dress for the job you want.
And 100%.
Not the one you
All
have.
right, guys. We need your final questions because we've already gone over our hour. So get those questions in now if you have anything you want to ask Felix.
This is quite fun though, to be honest.
I know. I hate closing it down when it's fun conversation.
Yeah.
That's why we've had some last. We've had a couple that went a couple hours, but it's hard to say no when you're getting so much good stuff. So in the meantime, while we wait for people to get in.
Let's do the last. Are there any more right now?
Not yet. No, I don't think so. Okay. Let me see. No.
But if I had to say, like, just if you're sitting watching this and you're going, right, I'm stuck in a little bit of rut, I don't know what to do next. Well, I like to say to people, you've tried nothing and you're all out of ideas. Great. You know, shoot something you haven't shot before. Reach out to someone in your neighborhood, in your town, in your area, and don't think just because it's every day to you that it's every day to someone else. You know, I remember one of my early mentors, Thorsten Overgaard, always told me a story. He was mentoring people online, and he's like, I had a Palestinian photographer and an Israeli photographer both send me their boring images of their day-to-day life. You're like, this is not boring, guys. Just because it's boring to you, they're like, sorry, this is just my like boring life over here. I'm like, no, I'm getting both perspectives. It's fascinating, right? And so like Joey L, I always was like so taken with his Halloween project because he's like, I think he couldn't go to Mexico to photograph the Day of the Dead. So he photographed Halloween in Brooklyn because he realized in other places people don't see Halloween. And I was like, that's exactly the perspective. So if you're stuck right now, obviously COVID, you know, you got to be careful.
Got to be stuck a little bit.
Yeah, got to be stuck a little bit. I get it. But at some point, the solution to being stuck, not having clients, blah, blah. Yes, you can go out to networking events and meet more people and try to convince people to hire you, or you can just photograph them. If you can just demonstrate what you're doing, people will take notice. I mean, if I wanted to get established in New York City, for example, let's say you wanted to make lots of money from portrait clients from rich families, right? You go up to the Upper East Side where they hang out and you just find some people and say, hey, I'm a photographer, I'd like to photograph you. for free. All I ask is that you post it on your Instagram with a link to me, right? And then suddenly the phone will start ringing. I mean, that's, I know Jerson Lopes did that in Sue's, Sue's, one of Sue's assistants. He would just go up to people, and he's not shy. He would just go up to people in Starbucks. Oh my God, you're beautiful. Can I photograph you? So he built his portfolio. But I mean, that's what I've been doing for 12 years. And it's gotten me everywhere, So
what do you say, which I 100% agree with you, but what do you say to those photographers who are kind of stuck in this idea of, no, paid work is the only work, free work is for suckers? Because that is a really kind of a serious mindset that is still out there.
There's a third category though. What they're saying is, yes, I only want paid work. I don't want to work for clients for free. Completely. This is not client work that you're doing for free. This is you deciding, I'm going to go out and do this thing, which is also back here for some reason. I'm going to go out and do this thing.
Back there.
Everything is. This is where the world is. That is actually where the world is. That's the rest of my studio. That's when you choose to go out. That's personal work. No one else gets to have any input, nothing about what you're doing. The amount of times that people have wanted to be involved in my personal project because they just want to get a free shoot, and I've been like, no, is every single time.
Yeah.
So
I think it's not a model. If you need a model.
Yeah, goodness, yeah. They're not usually that graceful either, Nicole. You're almost like, that's a lovely person to photograph.
Oh, well. I'll be on the next plane, Felix.
Now that you say that, wear a mask. No, but of course, if you the policy of, I'm not going to do free work for clients is 100,000,000% correct. That's not what I'm talking about. You're going out, out of your own pocket and saying, right, I want access to this. Any personal work I do, I'm like, look, this is my project, and everyone who's ever been involved in one of my personal projects knows it might be quite a while before you ever see any images.
Take what you can get and be happy, people.
Exactly.
Exactly. So David says, I just wanted to say, I find your honesty when it comes to social justice issues admirable. I always appreciate your takes. It comes across in your art.
It's the shit, man. It's fucking, listen. I think the biggest injustice, and it's right there in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is that the circumstances of someone's birth dictate far too much of the outcome of people's lives. And that is true across the entire planet. And anyone that thinks they're safe from the effects of the circumstances of your birth, history always comes back around, we have to work forever. And I think it's inarguable that any circumstance that you didn't dictate at your birth should never be used against you.
Agreed. 100% agreed. And sometimes even circumstances that you fall into via environment that you don't have control over.
Right. But that's exactly. The circumstances that you have no control over. I mean, I'm sorry, but when I was in school, my parents taught me not to we don't discriminate on people based on their height.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
sure.
It's like this is 8-year-olds in the playground learn this, anyone because the person who is tall or short or can't do anything about it.
Right.
So the only answer is acceptance.
Right.
It's not an anyway.
Yeah,
so I'm
it's mind-blowing that this needs to still be a conversation. We should be past the point that we have to discuss this anymore.
Yeah, why are we still having this conversation like this? It has to happen, but Jesus Christ. Yeah, so. Yeah,
it only happens when people keep talking about it and they don't stop talking about it until everybody is like, yeah, it's just a thing now. And then we don't have to talk about it anymore because we don't think about it anymore.
Sometimes I feel like we're just really, there's people who are making some sort of other narrative up about this. No, people shouldn't be being murdered extrajudiciously in the street. Like, I don't know what else there is to be said about that. And until we solve that, there's all the reasons why nothing needs to be done. But I'm sorry, something needs to be done.
Yep.
No matter which way you twist it.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah. And that's just the ugly boil on the top of the problem that we see.
Anyway. Yeah, there's so much more. Which is something I'm super grateful for. And I would encourage anybody who has any kind of a platform, and never assume that your platform is too small to make a difference. Just do what you can with what you have. Find the people,
urge anyone who hasn't read it, go and look up the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It talks about all of these things. And it is being violated in this country and many countries abroad. And it's a very simple document that covers all of this perfectly.
Yep. And just, I think, like anything else, like anything we've discussed up until this point, and I will say this 8 million times because I think it was one of the best insights I've ever heard. A man named Tom Bilyeu basically said, your biggest enemy is inertia. And you just have to go. And it doesn't matter if you're going in the perfect direction or if you have to change. You can't change directions if you're not moving. So just go. And if it's not right, that's okay. You have the ability to change it. But if you never start, then it's never going to happen.
No, sticking yourself in one spot doesn't work.
It doesn't. It gets you nowhere. It helps nobody. So move, just go. And you can redirect or change things. If you're moving, if you're not moving, you can't. So make things happen, people. Nose is itchy. Yeah. So we didn't get any more closing questions. So
all right. Well, we are at 90 minutes.
I know.
60-minute interview.
Yeah. It's well done. So the last and final small question is, which I feel like we've discussed a little bit, but it's the ending question always, is what is your why? Why make as a career?
Because banking and art are the only places you can create value from nothing. And banking doesn't actually create value, but we can create value from nothing. And short of the acquisition of resources from space, no one else is doing it. In the second law of thermodynamics, we live in a closed system, and art is a way of creating resources from within the system. And artists are probably the only people that can do it.
That's not the answer I was expecting, but I really, really like it. I like it very much. All right.
Yeah. I had a long conversation with Jeff Lazelle from Elinchrom about this over a couple of drinks. And I was like, the second law of thermodynamics explains all economics and why I'm an artist. He's like, okay. So, yeah.
Cool.
Probably didn't explain it all that well. I had a couple of drinks. But in a way, it is true. I mean, think about it. Everyone has to take something and turn it into something with more value. You add value by changing something that you take in and you put out. And we can kind of do that we have to have a lot of equipment, but we can do that kind of from out of thin air, artists.
Yeah. Nope, I agree. I think in a way, the ability to create is the thumbprint of God on humanity. Yeah. So that was longer than expected. However, it was a fantastic interview.
It's a shame Photo Plus isn't happening, because this would be a great chat, wouldn't it? A long chat.
It would. Yeah, agreed. That's okay. There will be more Photo Pluses and WPPIs and whatever else in the future. At some point, it will happen. So we'll make it there. Everybody who joined us today, Emily and David and Nate, who said, and when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. Thank you, sir.
Is that Nate Napolitano?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Nate. I will see you next week.
Aha. So thank you for that, good sir. and Hannah and Bobby and Simone and Dennis and everybody who is here today, guys. Thank you so much. You know, I always appreciate you guys being here to add spice to the conversation and ask your amazing questions. So thank you for that. If you guys find this content useful, valuable, please like and subscribe. The whole goal is to expose other people to people like Felix who can give you their insights into how they do what they do and why they do what they do, so that you can expand the way that you think and approach your life differently. And maybe that will be the wrench that gets thrown into your life that is the change you need in order to move forward. So please do that. And join me tomorrow at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Tina Eisen is going to be here. The lovely, the talented Miss Tina. She's going to be here. We're going to talk about her photography and the current art that she's creating and just get her insights into all of the amazing things that she's doing. So you guys will want to be here for that. And Felix, thank you so much for being here over time today. This was a pretty fantastic conversation.
Thank you for having me. That was a great chat. Yeah, really nice. Thank you, Nicole.
Yes.
You're excellent interviewer. Well, we're not really an interview. Excellent chat buddy.
Thank you, good sir. And so make sure that you go show Felix some love. Where can they find you online, Felix?
Instagram's probably best at Felix Kunze, my full name. If you type in Felix and add a K, it usually just pops up. It's the one that looks like me. And yeah, that's probably the best place. Instagram is kind of the central thing.
Perfect. And then if you want to find out all of the secrets of the light that we talked about, head over to thelightingseries.com. That is where you can jump on board.
I should mention the lighting series is, I don't know, I'm waving my headband at you. The lighting, it is getting late. The lighting series is 20% off, which is the lowest, it's just the lowest sales price during the Portrait Masters conference with the promo code Felix20. So yeah, forgot to mention that at the outset, but that's okay.
I know, but well, we've done it now. So go get your copy. Go get your copy with the promo code Felix20. You guys want that. Hi, Sam.
And will you include the link?
Yes.
Will you include the link for the book? Because it's a fantastic.
I linked it in the chat, and I will link it in the comments as well, or in the description, so people can get it. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, sir. Bye, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.